Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, we're going to look at the complete list of JavaScript array methods that are available to us since ES6. If you've been coding in JavaScript for as long as I have, you'd be familiar with libraries such as jQuery, moodtools, underscore, and a bunch of others, whose purpose it was to extend the native JavaScript library and add a bunch of features and functionality that we would use in pretty much all of our projects. Things like cloning, things like finding elements or objects within an array, and a bunch of other things. When ES6 finally got released, they included a lot of these functions natively. So today we're going to look through all of them. We're going to categorize them into their functionality, such as creating and merging arrays, testing, sorting. We'll look at reducers and iterators and a bunch of other new cool features that we have available to us out of the box when manipulating arrays. For each of these functions, I'll describe what they do, and I'll use some examples to show how they can be used in the real world. The purpose of array concatenation is to merge two or more arrays into a third brand new array. So here we have an example where we have an array of objects, which are animals, and we have an array of strings, which are just random names. And what we can do is we can create a third array called pets, and we can do animals.concat names. And then when we output pets, we're going to see that we've got pets is an array that contains the two animals, dog that goes woof, cat that goes meow, and we've got the two names there as well. So it doesn't look at or compare the type, it just merges everything together. Now there's some cool things you can do with concat as well, where for example, if we wanted to extend these names but really only have names that apply to pets, what we could do is put pets equals names, and we can see that pets now is the same as the names array. We can compare the two here. But the problem is if we add another name, let's say Rocky, you see that it's also being added to the names array. And that's because the names array is being referenced. So it's not creating a copy of it, it's just referencing that original array. So what we could do if we didn't want that is we could use the concat method, and we could concatenate pets with an empty array. And if you remember, like we said, concat returns a brand new array. And so what we can see is that pets is now not referencing names array directly, it's made a copy of it. And so now the names array has stayed the same with the two names, and the pets array now has the third name. The next method we're going to look at is fill. And what this method does is it fills an array with a certain value. So for example, if we console log a new array and we give it a length of 5, we can chain the fill method and we can say we want to fill it with 5 zeros. Or another example is, let's say we want to create an array of pets and we know that we're going to have 2 pets and they're both going to be dogs. So we can do pets equals new array, and we know that we're going to have 2 pets, and we can fill that with the first element in the animals array, which is dog. And so when we output pets, we can see that we've got 2 dogs. The from method creates an array from any sort of iterable value. So for example, if we wanted to split a string woof into an array with each element being a single letter, we can do const sound equals array dot from. We can reference animals.sound. Oh, we can do animals0.sound. And then when we output sound, we can see that we've got an array with 4 elements that spell the word woof. Let's have a look at a couple of methods that allow us to iterate over elements within an array. So we'll start with Foreach. So Foreach runs a method on every single element within an array. So for example, if we want to give each of our animals a name, we can do animals.foreach. We can do animal, and we can get the index, and we can say animal dot name equals names index. Now when we output the animals array, we can see that the dog has the name Dexter and the cat has the name Snoopy. So the map method works in a similar way to Foreach, except instead of modifying the reference array directly, it returns a brand new array. So for example, instead of modifying each object in the animals array directly, we can create a new array called pets, and we can do animals.map, and we can reference each animal and the position within the array, and then we're going to use arrow functions, and then we're going to say animal.name equals names index, just like we did. And we're going to see that if we output pets, it's got 2 elements but they're undefined, and that's because we have to return each animal. And we can see again that we've got 2 objects. We've got a dog named Dexter and a cat named Snoopy. We're going to look at some filtering methods. So we'll start with filter. So let's say we just want to get the cat object from the animals array. So we can do const cat equals animals.filter. And the convention here, just for simplicity, when we're using arrow methods, it's just a x, and we're going to say x.type equals cat. And when we output cat, there we go, we are returned with an array that contains all the objects that matched that filter. So just to make it a little bit more complicated, let's say we want all animals that has a sound with a W in it, which will return both of them. So we can do filter down to x.sound.index of W does not equal -1. And there we go, we've got both objects. The every method checks to make sure that every element within an array passes a test in a testing function. So for example, let's check to see if every animal object is a cat. So const are all cats equals animals.every. And again, we'll use the arrow function to say x.type equals cat. And when we output that, we see it's false. And that's because we've got 1 dog within our animals array. If we were to change that dog to a cat, you can see that our check passes. The isArray method is a helper method that helps us check whether a value being passed is an array or not. So for example, if we do console log array.isArray names, we're going to get true because names is an array. If we check animals, again, we're going to get true because animals is an array. But the string animals is an array, and so we get false. The sum method checks to make sure that at least one element within an array passes a test. So it's kind of like every, except every checks to make sure that every element passes the test, whereas some is happy if even just one passes the test. So again, so if we do const, they're cats, and we do animals.sum, and we check type to make sure that one is a cat, we're going to see that, yep, it's found at least one cat. Now let's see if there are any cows. We can see that. Are there any cows? No, there are not, because none of these objects have a type cow. Reducers are interesting. They allow us to reduce the value of an array into a single value. So as a very, very basic example, we can do a reducer that adds the values of all the elements in the array. So we can do reduce, and what it does is it takes a method, and that method has a couple of parameters, which is previous value, the current value being iterated over, and then finally it takes a second parameter, which is the default value or the initial value. So if we want to add all of these values up, we would have a method that says previous value plus equals current value, and we're going to return that, and the initial value we're going to have is 0, and if we assign this to result, when we output result, we're going to get 6, which is 1 plus 2 plus 3. If we add 4 and so on, it will keep on incrementing. It will reduce this array into a single value. Now that's cool, but we can also return an object. So for example, if we add another animal and we have it as type dinosaur, and the sound it makes is a roar, and then for each of these objects we add one more key, which is domesticated, and we know that dogs are domesticated. We know that cats are domesticated, but dinosaurs aren't. And we want to use the reduce method to find out how many animals within our animals array are domesticated and how many aren't. So let's create an object called animal stats. And it's going to be an object. Within that object, we're going to have a attribute called number of domesticated, and we'll start with 0, and number of undomesticated, again 0, and then we can create our reducer, so animals.reduce, and in our function we're going to call a previous value stats, and we're going to call a current value, which is the current animal, and we're going to say if animal dot is domesticated, then stats dot num domesticated equals stats dot num domesticated plus 1. Otherwise, we're going to increment the number of undomesticated animals. And then we're going to return that. And the initial value, we're going to pass this animal stats object, which is going to be passed in as reference. So the initial value of stats on the first run with this reducer method is going to be this, and then it's going to run through this logic, and it's going to keep on updating stats. So when we finally output animal stats, we're going to see that we have 2 domesticated animals and 1 undomesticated animal. Reduce right works the same way as the reduce method, except instead of going from left to right, it goes from right to left. So in this example, if we change reduce to reduce right, we're not going to see any difference because we're just updating our stats and the end result is always the same. The find method returns the first element in an array that passes a test that we create with a testing method. So for example, if we want to find the first animal whose type is 3 characters long, we can do const first 3 character animal equals animals.find x.type.length equals 3. And when we output that, we're going to see that the first 3 character animal is an object with type dog. Find index does the same thing as find, except instead of actually returning the element, it just returns the index of that element. So using the same example as find, if we change this to find index, we're going to see that first 3 character animal returns 0 instead of the object, because it's returning the position of that element. Includes is a method similar to find and find index, except instead of returning an element or an index, it returns a Boolean value that determines whether an element exists within an array. So for example, if we want to check whether our names array includes the value Snoopy, we can do const has Snoopy equals names.includes and then Snoopy, and then when we output that, we can see that it returns true. Index of searches an array and returns the index of the first found element. So for example, if we're going to search for Snoopy in the names array, we can do Snoopy index equals names.index of Snoopy, and then when we output that, we can see that we found it at location 1. Last index of works the same as index of, but instead of starting at the beginning of the array, it starts at the end, and so it's going to return essentially the last index that it finds of that element. So if we have 2 Dexters and we console log names dot last index of Dexter, it's going to return this element here rather than this one here. And just to compare, if we put index of, it's going to return the first one instead of this one. So push, pop, shift, and unshift are all methods that allow us to add elements and take elements away from an array. So push adds elements to the end of the array, and pop removes the last element from the array. And then shift takes elements from the beginning of the array, and unshift adds it to the beginning of the array. So let's do some examples. So if we output names here and we do names.push Rocky, we can see that push adds that element to the end of the array, and it's also going to return the new length of the array as well. And then if we do names.pop, it's going to remove that element again off that array. Now we can look at shift and unshift. So we can do names.unshift Rocky, and again we can see that it adds that element to the beginning of the array, and shift removes the first element off the top of the stack of the array. Slice and splice are 2 methods that get confused often. They seem really similar, the names are really similar, but the functionality is kind of different. So what slice is going to do is it lets you select part of an array and then just returns that part. It's not going to modify the array in any way. And splice is going to actually let us add and remove elements from different locations in the array. So let's use some examples so we can see what they look like. So if we do names.slice, and then we start at the beginning of the array and we specify just one element, we're going to see that nothing is actually changed in the names array. But if we console log what's returned there, it's returned the first element in that array, and that's because we started at the beginning and we specify just one element. So if we changed n to 2, we can see it returns the whole array. If we start at position 1, it's going to return the next 2 elements. If we compare that to splice, so if we do names.splice and we start again at the beginning and we set delete count to just 1, we're going to see that our names array is only left with that one element. If we again change our start to 1, we end with just that first element because we've deleted this next one. And if we specify 0, it's obviously not going to delete anything. If we do 0, 2, our array is going to be empty. And the cool thing here is we can actually replace the element that we've removed with another one. So if we remove Snoopy and we add Rocky, it's going to add that in. And if we add another one, Sophie, it's going to add that as well. Let's have a look at the array sort method. The sort method is going to sort all the elements in an array into ascending order. So as an example, if we have an array of numbers, it's going to sort them numerically in ascending order. And if we have an array of words, it's going to sort those alphabetically as well. The sort method also takes an optional compare function, which lets us create some custom sorting logic. So over here, if we have an array of numbers, we can write a custom sorting method here. Over here, we're going to sort in ascending order, or we're going to sort in descending order like we've done. So if I comment that one out, we can see that it sorts ascending or it sorts descending, depending on the logic that we use. Just to break this out and make it more clear, essentially what's happening is we're writing ages.sort. We're using arrow functions, but we can write normal functions as well. And the logic here is if A is more than B, return 1. Else if A is less than B, return -1. Otherwise, return 0. So if we want to switch this, we could put -1 here, and now we have descending order. When it comes to sorting strings, it's the same thing. If we want to sort in ascending order, we just call the sort method. And if we want to sort in descending order, we can use the logic we created above, and it will sort it in descending. We can also sort objects by properties. So in this example, we are using the compare function, and we're comparing the age of each of these animals. And we want to sort them from oldest to youngest. So we're going to do B minus A to sort in descending. We can see that cat, whose age is 5, comes first, and then dog, whose age is 3, comes second. Finally here, I've created a custom sorting algorithm. So if we have an array of numbers and we want to sort these by the number of times they appear in the array, we can use any JavaScript code within the compare function. So here I am filtering down and counting the number of times each element appears and sorting by that, and we can see that we get 2, which appears 3 times first, then 3, which appears twice, and finally we have 1, 1. We can actually optimize this as well. If we wanted to, we can create a count method and then just return count B minus count A to sort that descending. And in fact, we can add a dictionary and optimize it further. So now instead of having to count the number of elements each time, we're actually caching once we've counted the number of each element, so that the next time that element appears, we can just use the cached value. The reverse method literally just reverses the order of an array. So here, if we have two names, Dexter and Snoopy, and we call names.reverse, just like that, it's literally just going to flip the order of the array. So now the element at position 1 is at position 0, and the element at position 0 is now at position 1. The join method joins all the elements in an array using a separator. So for example, if we have an array of words and we want to form a sentence, we can console log words.join, and then we can specify a separator, which in this case we could say a space, and there we go, we get a string hello world. The toString method works in a similar way to join, in that it just outputs the contents of an array. Again, if we want to console log out words.toString, it literally just outputs the string hello, comma, world. There are 3 array methods that return iterators: entries, keys, and values. An iterator is an object that keeps track of its current position whilst accessing items in a collection one at a time. It returns an object with 2 properties, done and value. It also provides a next method which returns the next item in the sequence. When the sequence is finished, the value will equal undefined and done will equal true. So let's have a look at these 3 methods. Firstly, let's have a look at entries. Entries returns a key value pair iteration object. So if we put const entries equals words.entries and we output entries, we can see that it's an iterator object. And we can see that it has a next method. So let's call that. And if we output the value of that, we can see the value is 0, hello, and done is false. And if we do this again, now value is 1 and world. Now value is an array with key 1, value world, and done is still false. And if we call it one more time, value is undefined and done is true. Let's do the same thing with keys. So keys is going to do the same thing. It's going to return an iterator object containing all the keys of an array. So let's change entries to keys. And we're going to see the value is changed and it's outputting the key 0 and 1, and then finally undefined and done is true. And let's see values. We can see the iterator object returns the values, each element in the array, hello, world, and then finally undefined and done is true. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification button so that you get notified on all the future videos that we upload. I'll see you soon.